At 91, Shirley Jones, one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses, has finally broken her silence about a man who left a lasting mark on her life, Burt Lancaster. For decades, rumors swirled about what really went on between these two legends of the silver screen. Lancaster, known for his larger-than-life performances and equally powerful presence off-screen, was one of the most commanding actors of his generation. Jones, by contrast, was the radiant ingenue who captivated audiences with her warmth, grace, and authenticity. Their paths crossed during one of the most exciting and turbulent eras in Hollywood history, when studios controlled nearly every detail of an actor's career and whispers of scandal could make or break reputations. To the public, they appeared as colleagues and co-stars, connected by their work. But behind the camera, Shirley Jones carried memories and truths she chose to guard carefully. Until now. Why did she stay silent for so long? What was the nature of her connection with Lancaster, a man both admired and feared in the industry? And why, at this stage in her life, does Shirley feel ready to open up about the truth? What she reveals is at once surprising, poignant, and deeply human. It's a story about Hollywood's golden age, about friendship, respect, and unspoken boundaries, but also about the pressures, expectations, and quiet sacrifices demanded of actors living under constant scrutiny. In this video, we'll uncover what Shirley Jones has at last chosen to share about her experiences with Burt Lancaster. The truths she reveals will change the way you see both of these Hollywood legends forever. In the golden era of Hollywood, when studios still wielded extraordinary power and audiences idolized larger-than-life movie stars, few actors commanded as much respect as Burt Lancaster. Known for his athletic build, booming voice, and magnetic screen presence, Lancaster became an enduring symbol of rugged masculinity and intensity. Shirley Jones, on the other hand, was introduced to audiences as the epitome of innocence and charm, with a natural warmth that shone through in musicals like Oklahoma and Carousel. Their careers seemed worlds apart, yet fate would place them in the same orbit, leaving Shirley with memories she would never forget. Shirley first encountered Burt Lancaster in the late 1950s, at a time when her career was gaining momentum. She had already become a household name thanks to her roles in musicals that captured the optimism of post-war America. Lancaster, by contrast, was known for grittier, more dramatic roles in films like From Here to Eternity, which earned him both acclaim and a reputation as one of the most intense actors in Hollywood. On the surface, they seemed mismatched. She, the radiant ingenue, he, the hardened leading man. Yet behind the cameras, Shirley discovered something surprising about Burt Lancaster, something that challenged her perception of him entirely. According to Shirley, Lancaster had a reputation that often preceded him. Colleagues described him as demanding, sometimes difficult, and unafraid to assert control on set. He had co-founded his own production company, one of the first actors to wrestle creative control away from the major studios. This independence made him a trailblazer, but it also painted him as intimidating to those around him. Shirley, still relatively young and cautious about her place in Hollywood, admitted to feeling nervous before their first real conversation. But when the moment came, Lancaster defied her expectations. Instead of the domineering figure she anticipated, he treated her with warmth and surprising gentleness. He was curious about her background in music, asked about her early experiences on Broadway, and even joked about his own clumsy attempts at singing during his youth. It was the first glimpse Shirley had of the man behind the legend, someone capable of humor, vulnerability, and genuine interest in others. Their connection grew during moments in which Hollywood's pressure seemed overwhelming. Shirley later confessed that Burt had a way of grounding her, reminding her that the glamour and chaos of the industry were not the full picture of life. He had grown up in New York City, the son of working-class parents, and often spoke about how those roots shaped his sense of discipline and determination. For Shirley, who had also come from humble beginnings in Pennsylvania, this shared sense of groundedness became a foundation for their bond. One of the most striking details Shirley shared about Lancaster was his duality. On screen, he embodied larger-than-life characters, often ruthless or deeply flawed. Off-screen, he could be tender, thoughtful, and quietly observant. She recalled that during long breaks on set, he would sometimes sit in silence watching the crew, listening carefully, and only speaking when he had something meaningful to say. To many, this silence seemed intimidating. But to Shirley, it revealed a man who valued authenticity and rarely wasted words. Their early encounters also revealed Lancaster's protective side. Hollywood in the 1950s and 1960s could be an unforgiving place for young actresses, and Shirley was no exception. Studio executives often pressured her into roles, appearances, and publicity stunts that didn't align with her own desires. On more than one occasion, she remembered Burt stepping in, subtly but firmly, when he felt she was being unfairly treated. This support left a lasting impression on her, especially in an era when speaking up against studio heads was risky. Shirley admitted that she was struck by Burt's contradictions. He was capable of fiery anger if something didn't meet his high standards, yet he was equally capable of surprising kindness. He could be blunt, but his honesty never felt cruel. To her, he embodied the full spectrum of human complexity, which made him not just a remarkable actor, but a fascinating person. Looking back, Shirley described her first years of knowing Lancaster as a process of unlearning the myths surrounding him. The gossip columns often painted him as volatile or egotistical, but she saw a different side. A man who carried the weight of Hollywood's expectations with resilience, but who also craved genuine connections beyond the spotlight. Their friendship, while never defined by scandal or romance, became one of mutual respect and quiet admiration. For Shirley, those first encounters with Burt Lancaster opened her eyes not only to the realities of Hollywood, but also to the humanity of the stars she worked alongside. Behind the headlines and the carefully crafted studio images, she found a man who could laugh, who could care, and who could stand up for others when it mattered most. At 91, reflecting on those memories, Shirley Jones revealed that meeting Burt Lancaster was not just a chapter in her career. It was a life lesson about the complexity of people and the importance of looking beyond reputation to see the person within. Shirley Jones often said that Hollywood could be both a dream and a battlefield. On one hand, it was a world of opportunity, glamour, and acclaim. On the other, it demanded endless compromises and placed extraordinary pressure on those who dared to succeed. Working alongside Burt Lancaster brought both of these realities into sharper focus for her. It wasn't just about the characters they portrayed on screen. It was about how Lancaster's approach to the craft and to the industry itself shaped the way Shirley came to see her own career. By the early 1960s, Lancaster was no longer just an actor. He was a force of nature in Hollywood. Through his production company, Hecht Hill Lancaster, he had become one of the few stars who could call the shots on the kinds of films he wanted to make. This independence gave him a reputation for being uncompromising, and it was something Shirley greatly admired. She remembered vividly how Burt insisted on creative integrity, even when it ruffled feathers with studio executives. Watching him fight for what he believed in was a revelation for her. It showed her that, in a town that often demanded obedience, there was still room for defiance if you were brave enough to take the risk. Their professional paths crossed most prominently on projects where Lancaster's influence extended beyond acting. While Shirley's filmography leaned heavily into musicals and family dramas, she found herself observing Lancaster's grittier choices with fascination. Films like Elmer Gantry, where Burt played a fraudulent preacher with unnerving charisma, showed Shirley how far an actor could push themselves, taking risks that might have terrified others. Though she wasn't part of that film, she later revealed how Lancaster had encouraged her to watch his performance closely. "That's how you strip away vanity," she remembered him saying. "That's how you tell the truth even when it's ugly." This advice stuck with her. Shirley had always been celebrated for her wholesome image, but Lancaster's example challenged her to consider roles outside that safe box. And though her career never veered into the extremes of Lancaster's, she credited his influence with giving her the courage to pursue more complex, layered performances later in life. Working alongside him also gave Shirley an inside look at Lancaster's process. He was meticulous, sometimes obsessively so, He studied scripts line by line, dissected motivations, and often challenged directors if he felt they weren't pushing hard enough. To younger actors, this could seem abrasive, but Shirley realized it came from his relentless drive for excellence. He wasn't content to simply deliver a good performance. He wanted every detail of the production to feel authentic. He treated every movie like it was the most important story ever told, Shirley explained. This intensity could spill into tension on set, but it also elevated everyone around him. Shirley admitted that Lancaster's presence demanded the best from her. There was no coasting, no falling back on charm. If she shared a scene with him, she knew she had to be fully present, fully committed. It was exhausting, she laughed years later, but it was also exhilarating. You knew you were working with someone who wouldn't settle for mediocrity. Off camera, however, Shirley began to notice how Lancaster carried the weight of this intensity. He could be brooding after a long day, replaying scenes in his mind, critiquing himself harsher than anyone else could. Shirley once described him as a man always at war with himself, torn between his ambition and his longing for peace. It made her realize that the drive that made him a great actor also came at a personal cost. In quiet conversations between takes, Lancaster sometimes opened up to Shirley in ways that surprised her. He confessed that he worried about the passage of time, about the fear of being forgotten in an industry that was always hungry for the next new face. He talked about his regrets, roles he had turned down, relationships that had suffered because of his obsession with work. For Shirley, these moments revealed the vulnerability beneath his tough exterior. He wasn't just the iron-willed star. He was also a man searching for meaning, just like anyone else. One particular memory stayed with Shirley for decades. During a break on set, she confided to Burt about her insecurities, how she sometimes felt overshadowed by her girl-next-door image and wondered if she'd ever be taken seriously as an actress. Burt listened carefully, then told her something she never forgot. Don't ever underestimate what you give people. They'll remember the truth in your eyes long after they forget the songs you sang. For Shirley, this wasn't just encouragement. It was validation from someone she deeply respected. Though their professional collaborations were limited, Shirley believed that Lancaster had a profound impact on her journey. He showed her that being an actor wasn't about fame or applause, but about truth, even when it was messy or uncomfortable. He taught her that real strength didn't come from the image Hollywood created for you, but from the courage to challenge it when necessary. As Shirley reflected at 91, she admitted that Burt Lancaster had been one of the few people in Hollywood who truly shaped the way she saw her craft. Working with him wasn't always easy. His intensity could be overwhelming, and his stubbornness often caused friction, but it left her with lessons that lasted a lifetime. He demanded the best from himself, she said, and in doing so, he brought out the best in me. While Burt Lancaster's professional legacy is celebrated for its brilliance, Shirley Jones was clear that the man behind the legend was far more complex than the public ever knew. To the world, he was the towering figure of classic Hollywood, rugged, confident, and uncompromising. But to those who worked with him closely, including Shirley, there was another side, one that was softer, more conflicted, and at times deeply troubled. In conversations with Lancaster off-camera, Shirley found herself peeling back the layers of his personality. She admitted that she had initially been intimidated by him. His commanding presence, his no-nonsense demeanor, and his sharp wit made him seem untouchable. Yet, as time went on, she realized that Lancaster was carrying burdens that few people recognized. He wasn't just the strong hero he played on screen, she recalled. There were cracks in the armor, and those cracks made him human. Lancaster's reputation in Hollywood was notoriously complicated. He was admired for his fierce independence and his refusal to conform to the studio system, but he was also feared for his temper and intensity. Many directors dreaded clashing with him, knowing he wouldn't hesitate to challenge authority if he believed it compromised the integrity of a project. Shirley observed this firsthand, moments where his frustration bubbled over during disagreements on set. But she also noticed how, beneath the anger, there was a man who simply wanted authenticity, who believed audiences deserved nothing less than the absolute truth. Beyond his career, Lancaster's personal life was often the subject of gossip and speculation. He was known as a man of passion, someone who loved deeply but also struggled with relationships. Shirley remembered him confiding about his regrets in love, admitting that his dedication to his career sometimes left little room for personal happiness. He wanted it all: success, love, respect, but he often found that chasing one meant losing the other, Shirley revealed. These were not the kinds of admissions one expected from someone of his stature, but to her, they underscored the loneliness that came with being a Hollywood giant. Shirley also opened up about a lesser-known side of Lancaster, his generosity. Despite his intimidating exterior, he was known to quietly support younger actors and crew members, offering advice, encouragement, and even financial help when needed. Shirley recalled one incident where a young actress on set was struggling with self-doubt. Lancaster, without seeking attention, spent hours rehearsing lines with her until she felt confident enough to face the camera. "That was Burt," Shirley said. "He could be gruff, but he had a heart that cared deeply for people who were trying to make it." Another part of Lancaster's life that Shirley reflected on was his political and social convictions. At a time when many actors avoided controversy, he was outspoken on issues of civil rights and equality. Shirley admired his courage to take a stand, even when it risked his career. She remembered conversations where Lancaster spoke passionately about justice, fairness, and the responsibility of those in the spotlight to use their influence for good. It was yet another reminder that the man behind the screen roles was driven not only by ambition, but also by a deep sense of morality. Still, Shirley did not shy away from acknowledging the darker aspects of his personality. His perfectionism often left him dissatisfied no matter how much success he achieved. He could be demanding in ways that strained relationships, both professional and personal. Friends sometimes drifted away because of his intensity, and he carried regrets about opportunities missed due to pride or stubbornness. Shirley noted that these contradictions, his brilliance and his flaws, were what made him such a fascinating figure. "He was never simple," she explained. "He was complicated, sometimes frustrating, but always unforgettable." One of the most touching confessions Lancaster made to Shirley was about aging in Hollywood. As he grew older, he struggled with the idea of being replaced by younger stars. For a man who had once been at the very top, it was difficult to accept that the spotlight would eventually move on. Shirley recalled him saying, "It's not the applause you miss, it's the purpose. What do you do when the world stops asking for you?" To Shirley, this vulnerability revealed the human side of someone who had always seemed larger than life. Looking back, Shirley admitted that she saw both inspiration and caution in Lancaster's journey. His commitment to truth and excellence left an indelible mark on her, but his struggles reminded her of the importance of balance, something she worked hard to maintain in her own life. At 91, she wanted people to understand that Burt Lancaster was not just the powerful actor seen on screen. He was a man of contradictions, proud yet insecure, tough yet tender, brilliant yet flawed. "The world saw him as a legend," Shirley concluded, "but I saw him as a man trying to figure it out, just like the rest of us." As Shirley Jones looked back on her life and career at 91, she felt an urgency to speak honestly about the people who shaped her journey, and Burt Lancaster was one of the most significant among them. For decades, his name had carried a mythical weight in Hollywood, a name synonymous with power, excellence, and fierce independence. Yet Shirley believed that the true measure of Lancaster's legacy wasn't only in the films he made, but in the impact he left on those who knew him. For Shirley, speaking out about him wasn't about rewriting his story. It was about filling in the silences. Too often, legends are remembered only through their public image, flattened into symbols of perfection. But Shirley knew better. She had seen the cracks, the contradictions, and the vulnerabilities that made him more human than the legend suggested. "I don't want people to think of Burt as untouchable," she explained. "He was extraordinary, yes, but he was also just a man. That's what makes his story even more powerful." She reflected on the ways Lancaster's career reshaped Hollywood itself. His bold move to form his own production company in the 1950s gave actors a new kind of independence. inspiring others to take control of their creative destinies. His commitment to stories with social and political weight showed that film could be more than entertainment. It could be a mirror held up to society. To Shirley, this was his greatest contribution, his refusal to settle for easy roles or shallow scripts, always pushing for something deeper. But beyond the accolades, Shirley felt Lancaster's most enduring legacy was the way he influenced those who worked with him. He demanded honesty, not only from himself but from everyone around him. Shirley confessed that it wasn't always comfortable. Working with him could be exhausting, even intimidating, but in the end, it pushed her to grow. "Burt didn't let you coast," she said. "He forced you to find your truth, even if it scared you." That was a gift she carried throughout her career, long after their time together had passed. At 91, Shirley also spoke candidly about the importance of forgiveness and perspective. She acknowledged that Lancaster could be difficult, sometimes even harsh, but she no longer viewed those flaws with resentment. Instead, she saw them as part of the human condition, a reminder that even those who appear larger than life are still subject to the same struggles of pride, insecurity, and longing. "If I've learned anything at this age," she said, "it's that you have to see people as whole. You can't separate the good from the bad. You have to accept it all. That's what makes a person real." Her decision to share the truth about Burt Lancaster was also deeply personal. For years, she had held back, perhaps out of respect for his privacy, or perhaps because the wounds were too fresh. But as time passed, she felt a responsibility to preserve his memory honestly, for fans, for future actors, and for anyone seeking to understand what it meant to be both brilliant and flawed. "Legends deserve the truth," she explained. "Otherwise, they become fairy tales." And Burt's life was anything but a fairy tale. She also reflected on her own journey in light of Lancaster's influence. While she had carved her own path through musicals, television, and dramatic roles, she often wondered if she would have had the same courage to take risks without his example. His reminder that truth was more important than vanity became a guiding principle for her. Even in her later career, when she appeared on stage or in smaller projects, she carried his voice with her. "Every time I stepped in front of a camera, I thought of Burt," she admitted. "I thought about whether I was being honest with the audience, whether I was showing them something real." In her final reflections, Shirley spoke not just of Lancaster the actor, but of Lancaster the man she knew. She remembered his laughter during rare moments of ease, his sharp insights in late-night conversations, and the way he carried his insecurities quietly, hidden beneath the image of the strong leading man. Those memories, she said, were what she treasured most. Not the headlines, not the acclaim, but the glimpses of the real Burt Lancaster. For Shirley Jones, telling the truth about Burt was not an act of betrayal, but of love. Love for the craft they shared, love for the lessons he taught her, and love for the humanity that so often gets lost in Hollywood's carefully polished narratives. "At 91, she said softly, "you stop worrying about myths. You start caring about the people behind them, and Burt, he was one of the most unforgettable people I ever knew." In the end, Shirley hoped that by sharing her truth, she could give fans a fuller picture of the man who had shaped not only her career but an entire era of cinema. Burt Lancaster was a legend, yes, but more importantly, he was human. And in that humanity, in his flaws, his brilliance, and his struggles, his true legacy lives on.